Fluorescent lights hummed their eternal song in the corridors of Naval Medical Center, San Diego. The sound cut through the pre-dawn silence like a blade through water, thin, persistent, inescapable. It was 11:47 on a Thursday night in March, and the emergency department existed in that strange pocket of time when the chaos of evening had faded, but morning's resurrection had not yet begun. The air tasted of antiseptic and fear. Nora Blackwood stood in the supply closet on the eastern wing, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she counted gauze packages. 27, 28, 29. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, not a strand out of place. Her scrubs were the pale blue of junior staff, the color that marked her as someone who should be seen but not heard, useful but not essential. Her badge read Blackwood N, Junior Nurse, Supply Management. 6 years ago, that badge would have read something very different. 6 years ago, she had worn desert camouflage and carried the weight of lives in her hands while gunfire sang overhead. 6 years ago, Corpsman Nora Blackwood had been someone who mattered. Now she counted gauze. Her hands never trembled as she marked numbers on the clipboard. Muscle memory from a different life kept them steady. Blue eyes tracked inventory with the same precision they had once tracked vitals under fire. 29 became 30. 30 became 31. The scream of sirens shattered the quiet. Nora's body responded before her mind caught up. Clipboard lowered, shoulders squared. Weight shifted to the balls of her feet. The transformation took less than a second, a ghost rising from beneath civilian clothes, but she forced it back down. That wasn't her job anymore. That wasn't her place. The automatic doors exploded open. Chaos poured into the emergency bay like water through a broken dam. Two paramedics pushed a gurney at full speed, their faces tight with the kind of fear that comes from knowing you're losing. On the stretcher lay a young man, 19, maybe 20, his face the color of old snow. Blood soaked through the field dressings on his chest. Too much blood. The kind of blood that meant internal damage, the kind that meant time was an enemy already winning. GSW to the chest, multiple entry wounds, BP, dropping fast. The lead paramedic's voice cracked on the last word. Dr. Vanessa Hartley appeared from the physician's lounge, her white coat still bearing creases from where she'd been lying down. 35 years old, board-certified, decorated resume from Johns Hopkins. She looked at the gurney and Nora saw it, that microsecond of hesitation, that fraction of doubt that separated textbook knowledge from battlefield certainty. "Get him to Trauma 1, Hartley said, her voice fighting to sound steady. "Where's the attending? Someone page Dr. Morrison. We need..." The young man on the gurney made a sound that wasn't quite human, a wet, desperate gasp that meant his lung was collapsing. Nora knew that sound. She had heard it in the back of helicopters and bombed-out buildings in the sand while enemy fire painted the air with lead. She had 3 seconds to decide. Regulations said she should stay in her corner. Her badge said she was supply management. Her past said she wasn't welcome in moments like these. Her training said none of that mattered when someone was dying. The gurney crashed through the doors of Trauma 1. The overhead lights blazed to life, turning the room into an operating theater of stark whites and chrome steel. 2 junior nurses flanked the bed, their hands shaking as they tried to cut away the patient's shirt. One dropped the scissors. The metallic clatter echoed like a gunshot. Hartley moved to the head of the bed, her fingers searching for a pulse at the carotid. Heart rate 140. Blood pressure 60/40. Oxygen saturation 82%. "Someone get me, I need..." Her words scattered like birds from a tree. The monitors began their terrible song alarms, layering over alarms, each one a countdown to the moment when sound would become silence. "He's crashing." One of the nurses, barely 25, looked at Hartley with eyes that begged for answers. Hartley froze. Not physically, her body kept moving, kept reaching for instruments, kept performing the motions, but something behind her eyes went still. The hesitation grew from a microsecond to a full second, and in trauma medicine, seconds were the difference between life and death. The young man's chest rose and fell in irregular gasps. Blood bubbled at the corner of his mouth. His dog tags glinted in the surgical lights. Morrison Jacob T. Private first class. O positive. Nora stood in the doorway. She had no reason to be there. She had every reason to walk away. Her hands gripped the doorframe hard enough that her knuckles went white. "Push 2 units O negative, Hartley said, but her voice had lost its command. "Prep for intubation. I need someone get me a central line kit. Where is the rapid transfuser?" A nurse fumbled with the blood bag. It slipped from his hands, hit the floor. Precious seconds wasted retrieving it. The monitor's alarm changed pitch. The sound went from urgent to desperate, from warning to eulogy. Private Jacob Morrison was leaving the world, and the people in this room, trained, certified, educated, were watching it happen. Nora's eyes closed for one heartbeat. In that darkness, she heard different sounds. The thump of helicopter rotors, the crack of distant gunfire, a voice screaming, "Medic," over the radio. She opened her eyes, and the woman who had been counting gauze was gone. What walked into Trauma 1 was something else entirely. Her footsteps made no sound on the tile floor, but everyone felt her presence. It was the way she moved, not hurried, not panicked, simply inevitable. Like a tide coming in, like gravity. "Step aside." The words were quiet, calm, edged with something that brooked no argument. Hartley looked up, saw the blonde woman in junior nurse scrubs, and confusion flickered across her face. "Who are you? You can't be in here. This is—" "Step aside." This time the voice was different. Not louder, but deeper, carrying the weight of command that came from places where authority wasn't granted by degrees on a wall, but earned in blood and fire. This was the voice of someone who had given orders while mortars fell, who had made decisions when hesitation meant death. The room went silent except for the alarms. Hartley stared at this junior nurse, this woman who should be invisible, and something in that gaze made her move. Not understanding, not agreeing, simply responding to a force she didn't recognize but couldn't resist. Nora took position at the head of the gurney. Her hands found Private Morrison's chest. She didn't look at monitors. Monitors didn't ask for vitals. Her fingers read the story directly from his body, the way the chest wall moved asymmetrically, the subtle bulge on the right side, the quality of the breath sounds when she pressed her ear to his sternum. "Tension, pneumothorax, right side," she said, her voice clinical, now detached. "He's not bleeding out. His lung is collapsing and pushing everything else aside. Keep doing CPR on him, and you'll kill him faster." Hartley found her voice. "How do you— 14-gauge needle, now." "I don't know if we should—" Nora's eyes lifted. Blue ice meeting, brown uncertainty. "He has 90 seconds before his heart stops permanently. You can spend them arguing with me, or you can get me the needle." The nurse who dropped the scissors thrust a wrapped angiocath into Nora's hand. She tore it open with her teeth, her eyes never leaving Morrison's chest. Her fingers found the anatomical landmarks by touch, a second intercostal space mid-clavicular line. The place where rib met cartilage, the gateway to saving or ending a life. She didn't hesitate. The needle went in with the kind of precision that comes from doing something so many times that hands work faster than conscious thought. There was a moment of resistance, skin fascia pleura, and then release. The hiss of escaping air was the most beautiful sound in the world. Morrison's chest expanded. His color shifted from snow white to something closer to living. The monitor's rhythm changed from chaos to something that resembled hope. His oxygen saturation began climbing. 82, 85, 88. Nora's hands moved to start a proper IV line. Large bore antecubital vein threading the catheter with the casual expertise of someone who had done this while rockets screamed overhead. 2 liters normal saline wide open, she said. Then start the blood. O negative until we can cross-match. And someone check his abdomen if he's got internal bleeding. We're just buying time. She worked in silence for 2 more minutes, establishing the IV, checking for other injuries. Her hands reading Morrison's body like a book written in a language only she could fluently speak. Then she stepped back, stripped off the gloves, dropped them in the biohazard bin, walked toward the door. The room stared at her in collective shock. Nurses, residents, Dr. Vanessa Hartley with her Hopkins degree, and her frozen moment of doubt. "Wait!" Hartley's voice stopped her at the threshold. "Who are you?" Nora didn't turn around. "Nobody important, doctor. Just supply management." "You saved his life." "No." Nora looked back over her shoulder. "I just did what needed doing. You did the rest." "Where did you learn?" "Doesn't matter." Nora's voice was gentle, now tired. "Private Morrison is breathing. That's all that counts. You can take it from here." She walked out. Behind her, the trauma room slowly came back to life. Voices discussing treatment. Monitors settling into steady rhythms. Morrison's oxygen saturation hit 95%. He would live. He would see morning. He would get to call his mother and tell her he was okay. Nora walked back to the supply closet on the eastern wing, picked up her clipboard, found her place in the inventory. 31 packages of gauze. 32, 33. Her hands didn't shake. They never did. But in a small office 3 floors above, someone watched the security footage of what had just happened. Dr. Callahan Thorne, 64 years old, officially titled medical records consultant, but unofficially still the sharpest combat medic the Navy had ever produced, replayed the video 3 times. Then he smiled. He'd been waiting for someone like Nora Blackwood for a very long time. The break room at 6 in the morning held the peculiar exhaustion of people who worked while the world slept. 3 residents hunched over coffee that had been brewing so long it resembled motor oil. A nurse scrolled through her phone with the blank expression of someone too tired to process what they were seeing. Nora sat alone at a corner table eating yogurt that tasted like cardboard. The television on this wall showed the morning news, something about a hospital funding, cuts another story about rising veteran suicide rates. She didn't really watch, just let the sounds wash over her like white noise. The residents' conversation drifted across the room. They didn't bother lowering their voices. Junior nurses were furniture to them, invisible. Did you hear about Blackwood last night? The speaker was Dr. James Rutherford, fresh from his residency at Stanford, his white coat so crisp it practically crackled. The supply nurse. What about her? This from Dr. Sarah Kim, her voice thick with exhaustion from a double shift. She basically took over Hartley's trauma, just walked in and started treating the patient like she owned the place. Kim laughed without humor. Another washed-up military type thinking she knows better than board-certified physicians. What is it with these people? They can't accept that civilian medicine has moved past their crude battlefield techniques. Nora was 28, washed up. Hartley said she saved the kid's life. Rutherford sipped his terrible coffee. Hartley's a first-year attending. She'd think anyone looks competent. Kim scrolled her phone. These old vets, they're a liability waiting to happen. One wrong move and we're looking at a lawsuit. The hospital should have mandatory retirement at 40. Nora was 28, a liability. I heard Blackwood got kicked out of the Navy for insubordination. Rutherford's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper that carried perfectly across the empty room. Disobeyed direct orders during some mission. Went rogue. That's why she's here counting supplies instead of doing real medicine. The yogurt turned to ash in Nora's mouth. She stood, threw away the half-empty container, walked to the door, passed within 3 feet of the residents who fell silent, suddenly aware that furniture might have ears after all. She didn't look at them, didn't acknowledge them, just kept walking with that same unhurried, inevitable stride. In the hallway, she allowed herself one small concession. Her fingers found the small scar on her left forearm, a gift from Syrian shrapnel 3 years ago. She pressed it until the pain helped her remember that she could still feel something other than nothing. The intercom crackled to life. Blackwood to administration, Nora Blackwood to administration immediately. The words were polite, the tone was not. Director Marcus Lancaster's office occupied the 3rd floor of the administrative wing, a place where medicine was reduced to spreadsheets and human lives became data points on efficiency charts. The walls were decorated with framed certificates and motivational posters featuring sunrises over mountains and phrases like, "Synergy creates excellence." Lancaster sat behind a mahogany desk that cost more than Nora made in 6 months. 48 years old, MBA from Wharton, a man who had never touched a patient but made decisions about their care based on profit margins and risk assessment algorithms. He didn't stand when Nora entered, didn't offer her a seat. "Miss Blackwood." He said her name like it was a diagnosis. "Sit." Nora remained standing. Lancaster's eye twitched. "Last night you were observed intervening in a medical emergency in Trauma 1. You perform procedures that are not within your scope of practice as junior nursing staff. I saved Private Morrison's life." Nora's voice was flat. "You exceeded your authority." Lancaster pulled a folder from his desk. "You are employed as supply management personnel. Your responsibilities include inventory control equipment, organization, and stock rotation. They do not include emergency medical treatment." He was dying. "That is not your determination to make." Lancaster opened the folder. Inside were forms. So many forms. Dr. Hartley is a fully qualified emergency physician. She had the situation under control. She froze. She was assessing the situation. The patient was crashing. "Your interpretation of events differs from the official report." Lancaster's voice hardened. "Miss Blackwood, you are 28 years old. Saying you have been at this facility for 6 weeks. In that time, you have demonstrated a concerning pattern of disregarding protocol and overstepping your role." Nora said nothing. There was nothing to say that wouldn't make things worse. Lancaster leaned back in his chair. "I've reviewed your file. Navy Medical Corpsman, 6 years active duty. Afghanistan, Syria, honorable discharge." He paused on that last word, giving it weight. Honorable, not glowing, not exemplary, just honorable. The scar on her arm burned. You were separated from service following an incident during Operation Sandstorm in Syria 2022. The details are classified, but the outcome is clear. You chose to disobey a direct order from your commanding officer. Lancaster's eyes found hers. You have a problem with authority, Miss Blackwood. You think rules don't apply to you. I think rules exist to help people, not to watch them die. And that attitude is exactly why you're counting gauze instead of practicing medicine. Lancaster closed the folder with a snap that echoed in the quiet office. This hospital has protocols, chain of command, scope of practice guidelines. These exist for a reason: to protect patients, to protect the institution, to protect staff from legal liability. Private Morrison is alive because I broke your protocols. Private Morrison is alive because Dr. Hartley provided expert emergency care. Your interference could have resulted in his death. You're lucky it didn't. Lancaster stood now, using his height as a weapon. I'm going to be very clear, Miss Blackwood. You are on thin ice. The thinnest possible ice. One more incident, one more time, you step outside your assigned role and you will be terminated. Not suspended, not reprimanded. Fired. With a notation in your file that will ensure you never work in medical care again. The office fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Through the window, Nora could see the parking lot, the morning sun turning the cars into mirrors of light. Somewhere out there, Private Jacob Morrison was breathing because she had refused to be invisible. Do we understand each other? Lancaster asked. Yes, sir. You're dismissed. Nora walked to the door. Her hand touched the handle. Miss Blackwood. Lancaster's voice stopped her. This hospital is moving forward. We're investing in cutting-edge technology, AI diagnostic tools, robotic surgical systems. The future of medicine is about innovation, not nostalgia for battlefield improvisation. People like you with your outdated skill sets and your inability to follow procedure, you don't have a place in that future. Nora looked back at him. What happens when the technology fails, sir? When the power goes out or the system crashes and there's a patient dying in front of you, what then? Lancaster smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Then we'll call someone qualified to handle it, not someone whose only credential is breaking rules and getting lucky. She left without another word. The drive from Naval Medical Center to the VA hospital took 20 minutes through morning traffic. Nora made it in silence, her old Honda Civic threading through lanes with the same efficient precision she brought to everything. The radio stayed off. She didn't need music, didn't need distraction, just needed to move. The VA hospital sat on the eastern edge of the city, a collection of buildings that had seen better decades. Paint peeled from window frames, cracks spiderwebbed through concrete walkways. Budget cuts had carved away everything except the essential, and even those were hanging on by bureaucratic threads. This was where veterans came when they needed help and had nowhere else to go. Nora volunteered here every Thursday, had since her first week in San Diego. 2 hours of her time helping men and women who understood what it meant to serve, what it cost. The parking lot held more empty spaces than full ones. She pulled into a spot near the main entrance and sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, breathing. Through the windshield, she could see them. The old guard. Veterans in their 70s, some in wheelchairs, some with canes, all carrying invisible wounds that never quite healed. They gathered near the entrance, every morning smoking cigarettes they shouldn't smoke, telling stories they'd told 1,000 times, being together because being alone meant remembering things better, left buried. Nora grabbed her bag and stepped out into the morning sun. Corpsman, the voice came from a man sitting in a worn wheelchair near the door. Randall Foster, 73 years old, former explosive ordnance disposal specialist. He'd lost the use of his legs defusing a roadside bomb in Fallujah in 2004. Lost his marriage 2 years later when his wife decided she'd signed up for a husband, not a patient. Morning, Randall. Nora approached with a smile that was real, the first genuine expression her face had made in hours. Heard you had excitement last night. Randall's eyes were sharp despite his age. Young Marine got shot up. You saved him. News traveled fast in the veteran community. He saved himself. Nora deflected. I just helped. That's what we all say. A new voice joined the conversation. Deacon Keller emerged from the building, 71 years old, still moving like the Army's special operations soldier he'd been 4 decades ago. Did what needed doing, nothing special, just the job. It was the job, Nora said, and they punished you for it. This from Briggs McAllister, 68, former Marine sniper, a man who could still put 3 rounds through the same hole at 500 yards if his arthritis wasn't acting up. Same as they punished all of us. Do the right thing to get court-martialed, follow orders, watch people die. Either way you lose. Nora didn't answer. There was no answer to give. Come on, Randall wheeled toward the entrance. Doc's waiting for you inside. Said he needed to talk to you about something important. Doc was Dr. Callahan Thorne, and the nickname had followed him through 3 wars and 4 decades of service. 64 years old now, officially retired, unofficially, still the best combat medic any of these men had ever known. He volunteered at the VA, same as Nora, using skills that civilian hospitals considered obsolete to help patients that civilian doctors had given up on. They found him in the physical therapy room, helping a 50-year-old veteran with a traumatic brain injury relearn how to tie his shoes. The patient's hands shook with tremors that medications couldn't quite control, but Thorne's patience never wavered, over and over demonstrating the motion encouraging each small success. When the veteran finally managed a complete knot, his face lit up with the kind of joy that civilian doctors never got to see. The joy of doing something that had been impossible yesterday. Thorne looked up and saw Nora. Something passed across his weathered face. Recognition, assessment, decision. He excused himself from the patient and approached with the same unhurried stride Nora recognized in herself. The walk of someone who had learned that panic helped no one. Corman Blackwood. He offered his hand. His grip was still strong, still steady. Dr. Thorne. Heard about last night. Lancaster give you hell. Threatened to fire me if I step out of line again. Thorne nodded slowly. Same speech he gave me when I first started here. He thinks medicine is a business. We think it's a calling. Those two worldviews don't mix well. They walked together to a quiet corner of the therapy room. Through the windows, Nora could see the courtyard where veterans sat in the morning sun, some playing chess, others just existing in the company of people who understood. I need to show you something, Thorne said. From his pocket, he pulled a folded piece of paper. Not a printout, actual paper, the kind that suggested importance, permanence. He unfolded it carefully. It was a medical record, or rather a fragment of one. The header read, Reeves Sophie, DOB, March 15, 2016. Patient ID 4729-WR. The rest had been heavily redacted. Black bars covered most of the text, but a few phrases remained visible. Neurological atypicality following treatment protocol. Recommend continued observation. Classified under Program Genesis Directive. Nora's training kicked in automatically. She processed the information in layers. Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. That's a military hospital. This patient was 9 years old as of this month. The treatment dates are from 2021, which means she was 5 years old. Thorne's voice was grim. And whatever Program Genesis was, it did something to her. Something they're trying to hide. Why are you showing me this? Thorne looked out the window at the veterans in the courtyard. Because 23 children went through Program Genesis. 23 military dependents whose parents trusted the system to help them. And 19 of those children are now living with permanent disabilities that didn't exist before treatment. The words hung in the air like smoke. Sophie Reeves is one of them. Her father is Commander Garrett Reeves, SEAL Team 7. His daughter has been in a wheelchair for 4 years. Doctors say it's permanent, say there's no hope. Thorne turned back to Nora. But I've seen the symptoms. They don't match the diagnosis. They match something else. Something I saw in the field when soldiers experienced severe psychological trauma. Learned inhibition. The body teaching itself not to move because movement means pain. Nora's mind raced ahead, making connections. If it's learned, it can be unlearned. Maybe, if someone knew how to teach it. Thorne's eyes held hers. Someone with battlefield experience. Someone who's worked with trauma patients in extreme conditions. Someone who won't give up just because the computer says there's no hope. Why me? Because I'm 64 years old and they've already sidelined me. But you're 28. You've got fight left. You've got skills they don't teach in civilian hospitals. And most importantly, Thorne paused. You've already proven you'll do the right thing even when it costs you everything. Nora's phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. This is Commander Reeves. Dr. Thorne gave me your number. I need to talk to you about my daughter. Please, I'm desperate. She stared at the screen, thought about Lancaster's threat, thought about her career hanging by a thread, thought about playing it safe, keeping her head down, counting gauze until she was too old to remember what medicine used to mean to her, thought about a 9-year-old girl in a wheelchair who deserved better than the world had given her. Tell him I'll be there tonight, Nora said. Thorne allowed himself a small smile. Already did. He's expecting you at 7. The sun was setting by the time Nora pulled up to the Reeves house in Point Loma. It was a modest ranch-style home, the kind that military families bought when they got tired of base housing but couldn't afford mansion prices. The lawn was immaculate. The flag on the porch hung at perfect attention. Everything about it screamed discipline, order, control. Everything except the wheelchair ramp that cut across the front steps. Commander Garrett Reeves answered the door before Nora could knock. 42 years old, 6 feet of coiled readiness, wearing civilian clothes that couldn't quite hide the soldier underneath. His handshake was firm, but not crushing. His eyes assessed her in the way combat veterans assessed everyone, calculating threat level, measuring competence, deciding whether to trust. Miss Blackwood, thank you for coming. Just Nora is fine, sir. Then call me Garrett. He stepped aside. She's in the living room. The house was clean but lived in. Photos on the wall showed a progression of life wedding pictures with a beautiful blonde woman, deployment photos, and then photos of just father and daughter. The mother was conspicuously absent from anything dated after 2022. My wife passed 3 years ago, Garrett said quietly, following Nora's gaze. Car accident. Sophie was in the back seat. I'm sorry, but don't be. Just help my daughter if you can. Sophie Reeves sat in her wheelchair by the window watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. 9 years old, blonde hair in a ponytail, wearing a Captain America t-shirt. She turned when they entered, and Nora saw intelligence in those young eyes. Too much intelligence for someone so small. The kind of awareness that came from learning early that life wasn't fair. Hi, Sophie. Nora knelt so they were eye level. I'm Nora. You're the one who saves people. Sophie's voice was matter of fact. Dad says you're like him. You were a soldier. I was. Did you kill people? Sophie to Garrett started, but Nora raised a hand. Yes, I did. I'm not proud of it, but sometimes I had to save the people I was protecting. Sophie considered this. The doctors say I'll never walk again. Is that true? I don't know yet. Can I examine you? Okay. Nora spent the next hour doing what no doctor had done in 4 years. She didn't use machines, didn't order scans, just used her hands, her eyes, her instincts, honed in places where technology was a luxury and skill was survival. She tested reflexes, watched muscle responses, applied pressure to nerve clusters, and observed the subtle reactions. Talked to Sophie about what she felt, what she remembered, what happened in her body when she tried to move. And slowly, carefully, the picture came together. Tell me something, Nora said finally. When you think about moving your legs, what does it feel like? Sophie was quiet for a long moment, like standing at the edge of a swimming pool filled with ice water. You know, if you jump in, it's going to hurt so bad. Your body remembers the shock even before it happens. So it feels safer to just not jump, to stay still. The words were almost exactly what Nora had read in classified reports about neural feedback loops, about how the brain could learn to anticipate pain so strongly that it prevented movement before it could begin. Not paralysis, protection. Your brain is protecting you, Nora said softly. It's trying to keep you safe from pain, but it's protecting you from something that's not really there anymore. Can you fix it? I don't know, but I can try. Garrett had been standing in the doorway listening. Now he stepped forward. The doctors read scans, Nora interrupted gently. They see structural damage and assume functional impossibility. But I've seen soldiers with catastrophic injuries walk again because no one told them they couldn't. I've seen people paralyzed by fear move when they found something worth moving for. She turned back to Sophie. Your body isn't broken. Your brain just needs to remember that movement doesn't mean pain, that it's safe to try. Sophie's eyes filled with something Nora recognized. It wasn't quite hope. Hope was too dangerous for someone who'd been disappointed too many times. But it was something close, a willingness to try. When do we start? Sophie asked. Nora looked at Garrett, thought about Lancaster's threat, thought about her career, her future, everything she was risking. Thought about a 9-year-old girl who deserved a chance. Tomorrow, Nora said. We start tomorrow. As she drove home through the darkness, Nora's phone buzzed again. A text from Dr. Thorne. Commander Reeves called me. Said you're in. Good. You're going to need help. Meet me at the VA tomorrow 6 a.m. Bring coffee. Nora smiled despite herself. She was already in too deep to turn back now. The VA hospital at dawn belonged to ghosts. Not the haunting kind, but the living kind, men who had seen too much and carried it in the way they moved, the way they spoke, the way they existed in a world that had mostly forgotten them. They gathered in the pre-dawn darkness like pilgrims to a shrine that only they understood, drawn together by something stronger than friendship, deeper than camaraderie. Brotherhood. Nora arrived at 5:45, 2 coffees in hand, and a plan that would probably get her fired forming in her mind. The parking lot held a dozen cars, all of them old, all of them American-made, all of them maintained with the kind of obsessive care that spoke to men who needed something to control in a world that felt increasingly beyond their grasp. Dr. Callahan Thorne waited by the entrance, leaning against the brick wall, with the patient stillness of someone who had learned to conserve energy for when it mattered. 64 years old, and he still looked like he could go the distance if called upon. Gray hair cut military short, weathered face that had seen the Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan, eyes that missed nothing. "You're early," he said, accepting the coffee. "Learned it in the Navy. If you're on time, you're late." "Good habit." Thorne sipped the coffee, grimaced at the taste, drank it anyway. "Come on, there's people you need to meet before we talk about what you're planning." They walked through corridors that smelled of industrial cleaner and decades of suffering. The VA was understaffed, underfunded, existing on budgetary scraps, while politicians gave speeches about supporting veterans. The paint was institutional beige. The floors were clean, but scarred. Everything about it said, "We care, but not enough to actually invest resources." But the people who worked here, the volunteers, the nurses, who could make more money anywhere else, the doctors like Thorne who refused to let bureaucracy kill their calling, they made up for what money couldn't buy. The physical therapy room held 5 men. Nora recognized Randall Foster in his wheelchair. Deacon Keller with his special ops bearing Briggs McAllister, who moved like on age, was a suggestion he hadn't fully accepted. 2 others she didn't know. Thorne made introductions. "Gentlemen, this is Corpsman Nora Blackwood. 6 years active duty, Navy Special Operations Medical Support, Afghanistan and Syria. She's the one I told you about." The men assessed her with the same thorough evaluation Garrett Reeves had used, looking past the blonde hair and the civilian clothes to see what was underneath. Veterans could always spot other veterans even across a crowded room, even years after the uniform came off. "Afghanistan, huh?" This from a man Thorne introduced as Marcus Webb, 65 Army Rangers, 3 tours. "When were you there?" 2016 through 2019. Forward Operating Base Salerno, then Camp Dwyer. Dwyer. Webb's expression shifted slightly, respect earned through geography. "Lost a lot of good people at Dwyer." "Yes, sir, we did." "She was there during Operation Sandstorm," Thorne added quietly. The room went still. Operation Sandstorm wasn't widely known, classified, mostly forgotten, buried in the archives of wars that people wanted to forget. But these men knew. They followed the news that mattered, tracked the battles that weren't on sea, and then remembered the operations that the public never heard about. "Heard about that," Briggs said finally. "Heard you made a choice that cost you." Nora met his eyes. "I made a choice that saved 3 children. It cost me my career. I'd make it again." Silence. Then Deacon stood and offered his hand. "Welcome to the club, Corpsman. We've all been where you are. Done the right thing. Paid the price. Still here." She shook his hand. His grip was strong, callous, the handshake of a man who had built things and torn things down and learned the difference between the two. Thorne cleared his throat. "Nora's taking on something that might get complicated. Commander Garrett Reeves' daughter. 9 years old, wheelchair-bound, for 4 years victim of a military medical experiment that went wrong. She's going to try to help the girl. Off the books. Against hospital policy. Probably illegal in several interesting ways." "And you need us why?" Randall asked. "Because if I'm right about what happened to Sophie Reeves, there are powerful people who want it to stay buried. People with resources. People who've already proven they'll do whatever it takes to keep this quiet." Thorne looked at each man in turn. "She's going to need backup. The kind that knows how to watch a perimeter. The kind that won't fold when things get ugly." Webb laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Doc, I'm 65 years old and my knees sound like Rice Krispies when I stand up. What exactly do you think I'm going to do against trained operators? Be yourself. Be a man who knows what a threat looks like before it becomes a threat. Be someone who's still got skills, even if the body slowed down." Thorne's voice was steady, certain. "These kids today, they've got technology and training, but they don't have what you have. 40 years of experience reading in situations, knowing when something's wrong before it goes bad. That's worth more than young knees." The men looked at each other. Some unspoken communication passed between them, the wordless conversation of people who'd served together or apart, but always understood the same fundamental truths. "I'm in," Randall said from his wheelchair. "Been looking for a reason to feel useful again." And Deacon confirmed. One by one they agreed. Not because they knew Sophie Reeves, not because they understood the medical complexities, but because one of their own needed help, and that was the only reason that mattered. Nora felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. Thank you. Don't thank us yet, Webb said. Wait until we see if we're any good at this anymore. Thorne checked his watch. Corman, you've got a shift starting at Naval Medical in 2 hours. Better get moving. Tonight we start work on Sophie. I'll have everything ready at Commander Reeves' house by 1800. Nora nodded, but before she could leave, Thorne caught her arm. His voice dropped low enough that only she could hear. What we're doing helping this girl, it's the right thing, but it's going to cost. Be ready for that. And when the bill comes due, don't try to pay it alone. That's what these men are for. That's what I'm for. Understand? Yes, sir. Good. Now go count some gauze and try not to save any lives until your shift is over. Despite everything, Nora smiled. The shift at Naval Medical Center passed with excruciating slowness. Inventory management, stock rotation, checking expiration dates on supplies that would probably expire again before anyone used them. Work designed to keep her hands busy and her skills wasted. Director Lancaster passed her in the hallway, once his expression neutral, but his eyes held a warning. One wrong move. That's all he was waiting for. One excuse to end her career permanently. Dr. Vanessa Hartley found her in the supply closet around noon. The young physician stood in the doorway, shifting her weight from foot to foot like someone working up courage. Can I help you, doctor? Nora didn't look up from her clipboard. I wanted to say thank you for last night with Private Morrison. You already thanked me. No, I mean really thank you, not just for saving him, but for not making me feel like an idiot afterward. Hartley stepped into the closet, lowering her voice. Most people who've done what you did, they'd have rubbed my face in it, made sure everyone knew I froze. Nora set down the clipboard. You didn't freeze. You hesitated. There's a difference. Hesitation means you were thinking, weighing options, trying to choose the best course. That's what good doctors do. I almost killed him. No, you almost let him die. That's different too. You didn't cause the injury. You just didn't know how to fix it fast enough. Nora's voice softened. I've been doing emergency medicine since I was 22. You've been an attending for, 6 months? You'll learn. You'll get faster. You'll develop the instincts. Hartley's eyes glistened. Will you teach me? I know that's asking a lot, and I know you're not supposed to be doing clinical work, but I can't. The words hurt to say. Lancaster made it very clear. If I step outside my role again, I'm gone. Right, of course, I shouldn't have asked. Hartley turned to leave. Dr. Hartley. Nora waited until the other woman looked back. You did good work after I stabilized Morrison. You made good decisions. You're going to be an excellent physician. You just need time and experience. Don't let one bad moment make you doubt yourself. How do you not doubt yourself after everything that happened in Syria after losing your career? How do you still believe you did the right thing? Nora thought about 3 children with shrapnel wounds and eyes that trusted her to save them. Thought about the American soldier who died because she chose civilians over military. Thought about the court-martial and the discharge, and the 6 years of trying to find purpose in a world that had decided she was more trouble than she was worth. I doubt myself every day, Nora said quietly, but I don't doubt the choice. There's a difference. Hartley nodded slowly. Then, surprising them both, she stepped forward and hugged Nora. Brief, awkward, genuine. Thank you, she whispered, and left before Nora could respond. The rest of the shift crawled by. 5 o'clock became 5:30, became 6. Nora's phone buzzed with a text from Thorne. Equipment ready, Reeves' house. Don't be late. At 6:15, Nora clocked out. Changed from scrubs to jeans and a t-shirt in the locker room. Gathered her things. Walked through the parking lot toward her Honda Mine, already shifting to the work ahead. She didn't notice the black sedan parked 3 rows away. Didn't see the man inside taking her photograph with a telephoto lens. Didn't know that her every move was being documented, cataloged, prepared for use against her when the time came. The surveillance had begun. The Reeves house at 7 p.m. looked different than it had the night before. The living room had been transformed into something between a physical therapy clinic and a combat medical station. Mats on the floor, resistance bands hanging from door frames, a massage table that looked like it had been borrowed from the VA. Sophie sat in her wheelchair near the window, watching with wide eyes as Thorne arranged equipment with the precision of someone who'd set up field hospitals and bombed out buildings. This is a lot, Garrett Reeves said, standing beside Nora. Recovery is a lot, Nora replied. We're not going to fix this in one session. We're not going to fix this in a week. This is going to take time and it's going to hurt, and there's going to be moments when Sophie wants to quit. When you want me to stop, when I want to stop, we push through those moments or we fail. I understand. Do you? Nora turned to face him. Because I need you to really understand. What I'm about to do with your daughter, it's not approved by the medical board. It's based on techniques I learned in war zones treating soldiers with psychological trauma. If it works, it'll be because Sophie is stronger than she knows. If it fails, it could make things worse. And either way, when this gets out, and it will get out, people are going to come after me. Possibly you. Definitely this whole setup. Are you ready for that? Garrett's jaw tightened. My daughter has spent 4 years in that chair. 4 years of doctors telling me there's no hope. 4 years of watching her accept that this is her life now. If you're telling me there's a chance, any chance at all, then I don't care about the consequences. We fight. Good. Nora walked to Sophie, knelt down. Hey, kiddo, you ready to start? Sophie nodded, but Nora saw the fear underneath. The fear of hoping, the fear of failing, the fear of pain. Tell me if it's too much. This only works if you're honest with me. Deal? Deal. They started slow, Nora explaining each step, each technique, each goal, teaching Sophie about the connection between brain and body, about how trauma could rewire neural pathways, about how the mind could learn to fear movement more than it feared stillness. Your brain is trying to protect you. Nora set her hands gently manipulating Sophie's leg, feeling for muscle response. After the accident, movement meant pain. So your brain said, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. It shut down the pathways. Not because they're broken, but because it's trying to keep you safe. But I want to move. I know. And we're going to teach your brain that it's safe to let you, but it's going to take time. It's going to take you to being brave enough to push through the fear. They worked for an hour. Gentle stretches, pressure point stimulation, visualization exercises where Sophie imagined movement before attempting it. Thorne assisted his experienced hands, knowing exactly where to apply pressure, how long to hold, when to release. And then 40 minutes into the session, something happened. Nora had her hand on Sophie's calf, applying steady pressure to a nerve cluster. Sophie, I want you to think about moving your toes. Not actually move them, just think about it. Imagine what it would feel like. Sophie closed her eyes, concentrated with the fierce intensity that only children could manage, and the muscle in her calf twitched. Not much. Maybe 2 millimeters of movement, barely visible, but visible enough. Thorne saw it at the same moment Nora did. Their eyes met. Nora kept her expression neutral, didn't want to make a big deal, didn't want to create pressure, but inside her heart was hammering. Good, she said softly. That was really good, Sophie. You felt that? I felt something, like the water was a little warmer than I thought. Exactly. Nora's voice was steady, calm, giving away nothing of the excitement rushing through her veins. That's exactly right. We're going to do that again, and again, and again, until your brain learns that the water is safe. They continued for another 20 minutes before Nora called it. Sophie was exhausted, her face pale, her body trembling from the effort of fighting against her own neural programming. That's enough for tonight, Nora said. You did amazing work. I only moved a tiny bit. You moved. 4 hours ago, you couldn't do that. Now you can. That's not tiny. That's huge. Nora helped Sophie back into her wheelchair. Rest, drink water. Tomorrow we do it again. Garrett walked Nora and Thorne to the door. That was real, wasn't it, what I saw? It was real, Thorne confirmed. Voluntary muscle response. Proof that the neural pathways aren't dead, just dormant. How long until she can walk? We don't know, Nora said honestly. Could be months, could be years, could be never. But now we know it's possible. That's more than we had yesterday. She left feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. The sense that she was doing what she was meant to do, consequences be damned. The black sedan followed her home from 3 cars back. The man inside made detailed notes about arrival times, duration of visit, individuals present. The report would be on Colonel Marcus Wolf's desk by morning. 3 days passed. 3 sessions with Sophie. 3 evenings of careful patient work that produced small incremental progress. A toe curl that lasted 2 seconds. A muscle flex that showed intentional control. A reduction in the fear response when Sophie attempted movement. Each night, the black sedan followed Nora home. Each morning, new photos arrived on Wolf's desk. On the 4th day, everything changed. Nora was in the supply closet at Naval Medical, counting surgical masks, and trying not to think about how much her skills were being wasted when her phone buzzed. A text from Thorne. Call me now, urgent. She stepped into the hallway, dialed. Thorne answered on the first ring. We have a problem. His voice was tight. Dr. Vanessa Hartley just called me. She's been following you. What? She wanted to see what you were doing with Sophie. She's been parking down the street from Reeves' house, watching through the window. She saw last night's session, saw Sophie move. Nora's blood went cold. Is she going to report it? No, she wants in. She wants to help. Says she's tired of medicine that gives up on patients. Says she wants to learn what you know. Thorne paused. But here's the thing. If she found you, others can too. And based on some inquiries I've been making, I think someone already has. Garrett's been flagged in the DoD system for unusual access to classified files. Someone's watching him, which means someone's watching you. Who? That's what I'm trying to find out. But Nora, this is bigger than we thought. Program Genesis wasn't just a failed experiment. It was a $3 billion research program funded through diverted veterans' healthcare money. When it failed, when those kids got hurt, someone very high up decided it was cheaper to bury the evidence than fix the problem. How high up? Colonel Marcus Wolf. He was the medical director for the program. Now he's deputy director of medical operations for the entire Department of Defense. He's been systematically suppressing information threatening families, making sure the truth never comes out. Nora leaned against the wall. So if we succeed with Sophie, if we prove the disabilities aren't permanent, we prove that Wolf and his team knowingly abandoned children who could have been helped. We prove negligence at minimum, possibly criminal misconduct. That's a multi-billion-dollar scandal and a lot of very powerful people going to prison. He's going to come after us. He already is. Thorne's voice was grim. Be careful, Corman. This just got dangerous. The call ended. Nora stood in the hallway processing. She thought about walking away, about going back to counting gauze and keeping her head down and living a quiet, safe, meaningless life. Thought about Sophie's face when her toe had curled for the first time. Thought about 19 other children in wheelchairs whose families had been told to accept the unacceptable. Thought about 3 Syrian children she'd saved while bullets tore the air around her. She had never been good at walking away. That evening, 5 people gathered at the Reeves house. Nora, Thorne, Garrett, Hartley, and Sophie, who looked at the young doctor with curiosity. You're the one who froze when the soldier was dying, Sophie said bluntly. Hartley flinched but nodded. Yes, I made a mistake. Nora saved him. And now you want to help me. I want to learn. I want to be the kind of doctor who doesn't freeze, who doesn't give up. Hartley met Sophie's eyes. I want to be better. You can help me do that. Sophie considered this, then nodded. Okay, but you have to listen to Nora. She knows what she's doing. I will. They began the session. Hartley watched with absolute focus as Nora worked, asking questions, taking notes, learning. For the first time in her career, she was seeing medicine practiced not as a series of protocols, but as an art form guided by instinct and experience and the willingness to try things that textbooks said were impossible. 45 minutes in, Sophie managed to flex her ankle 3 degrees. Hartley gasped. Oh my God. Don't make a big deal, Nora said quietly. She needs to feel like this is normal progress, not a miracle. Miracles create pressure. Hartley nodded, swallowing her excitement. They worked for another 30 minutes. Then Nora called the session. Sophie was exhausted, drenched in sweat, trembling. You're doing so good, Nora said, helping her into the wheelchair. Rest now. As they cleaned up, Hartley pulled Nora aside. That was incredible. How did you know where to apply pressure? How did you know how long to hold? Experience, trial and error, lots of failures before the successes. Nora coiled a resistance band. In the field, you don't have MRI machines or advanced diagnostics. You have your hands and your knowledge of anatomy and your willingness to try things. You learn to read the body directly. Can you teach me? I'm already teaching you. Hartley smiled, but it faded quickly. Nora, I need to tell you something. Lancaster called me into his office today, asked me about you, asked if I'd seen you doing any unauthorized medical work. I told him no, but I don't think he believed me. He's looking for an excuse to fire you. I know. Aren't you worried? Nora looked at Sophie, who was laughing at something her father said. The sound of a child finding joy. I'm terrified, but I'm more terrified of stopping, of walking away and knowing I could have helped but didn't because I was scared of the consequences. That's brave. No, brave would be doing this without fear. I'm just doing it despite the fear. That's different. They left together, Hartley heading to her car, Nora walking with Thorne toward his old pickup truck. The evening air was cool, carrying the salt smell of the nearby ocean. She's good, Thorne observed. Hartley, she's willing to learn. That matters more than talent. Agreed. But she's also a risk. The more people involved, the harder this is to keep quiet. I know. Nora opened her car door. But we're going to need help. If Wolf is watching, if he decides to move against us, we need people who won't back down. Speaking of which, Thorne pulled an envelope from his jacket. Garrett wanted you to have this. Don't open it now. Wait until you get home. Nora took the envelope. It was sealed unmarked, heavy like it contained more than just paper. She drove home in silence, mind churning through possibilities and plans. At her apartment, she sat on the worn couch that had come with the furnished rental and opened the envelope. Inside were two things. The first was a document, a full unredacted medical record for Sophie Reeves. The header showed it had been classified top secret Department of Defense access only. Garrett had committed a federal crime obtaining this. The second item was a handwritten note. Corman Blackwood, my daughter has hope for the first time in 4 years. That's worth any price. If they come for you, they come for me first. If they threaten you, they threaten a Navy SEAL commander with friends in special operations who don't appreciate their brothers being targeted. You're not alone in this fight, Garrett. Nora read the note 3 times, then carefully returned everything to the envelope and hid it in the false bottom of her sock drawer, a trick learned in Afghanistan where hiding sensitive material was sometimes the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop treating the Reeves girl. Last warning, next steps will be more direct. No signature, no identifier, just a threat delivered with bureaucratic efficiency. Nora stared at the message for a long moment. Then she did something that would later prove crucial. She took screenshots, backed them up to cloud storage, and forwarded them to Thorne and Garrett with a simple message. They're making contact. Then she deleted the original, blocked the number, and went to her laptop. Started researching Colonel Marcus Wolfe, his career, his connections, his vulnerabilities. If they were going to threaten her, she needed to understand exactly who they were. What she found over the next 2 hours made her blood run cold. Wolfe wasn't just a colonel, he was connected to defense contractors, pharmaceutical companies, politicians. His web of influence stretched through the Department of Defense like cancer through tissue. And according to leaked documents from whistleblower sites, Program Genesis had been worth $3 billion in research funding. Money that had been earmarked for veterans' health care redirected to experimental programs and then buried when those programs failed. $3 billion, 23 children, 19 lives destroyed. And Wolfe had been the one signing the checks. Nora was still reading when her doorbell rang at 11 p.m. She approached cautiously, hand on the pepper spray in her pocket, another Afghanistan habit that civilian life hadn't broken. Through the peephole, she saw Randall Foster in his wheelchair, Deacon Keller standing behind him. She opened the door. What are you doing here? Thorne called us, Randall said. Said you got a threat, said you might need watching. I'm fine. Sure you are. Deacon's eyes scanned the street behind them with the automatic vigilance of someone who'd survived too many ambushes to ever truly relax. That's why we're going to sit in our van across the street and make sure you stay fine. Don't argue, just let us do this. Nora wanted to protest, wanted to say she didn't need protection, didn't need old men putting themselves at risk for her. But looking at their faces, she understood. This wasn't about her needing protection. This was about them needing purpose. About veterans who'd been sidelined and forgotten being given a mission again. Okay, she said, but if anything happens, you call the cops. Don't try to be heroes. Randall laughed. Corman, we're 73 and 71 years old. Being heroes is literally all we've got left. They took up position in a battered van with veteran plates. Through her window, Nora could see them settling in thermos of coffee, appearing binoculars coming out. The last guard standing watch. Nora closed her curtains and tried to sleep. Tomorrow she had another shift at the hospital, another day of pretending to be invisible while powerful people decided her fate. Another evening of teaching a 9-year-old girl that the body could remember what the mind had forgotten. Another step closer to either salvation or destruction. She didn't know which, but she knew she wouldn't stop. The attack came on the 7th night. Nora had just finished the evening session with Sophie. Progress was accelerating. The girl could flex her ankle voluntarily, could generate visible muscle contractions in her calves, could feel sensation returning to places that had been numb for 4 years. Not walking yet, not even close, but moving. Choosing movement. Reclaiming what had been stolen. Dr. Hartley had stayed to observe her medical notebook filled with detailed observations about technique, timing, patient response. She was learning fast, asking the right questions, seeing patterns that most physicians trained in sterile classrooms would miss. War taught you to see differently, to trust your hands more than your instruments. It was 9:45 p.m. when Nora's phone buzzed with a text from Deacon Keller, who'd taken up position in his truck down the street. 4 men, tactical gear, moving toward the house from the north. Get Sophie somewhere safe, now. Nora's body shifted into combat mode before her conscious mind registered the threat. Adrenaline flooded her system. Time slowed. Every sense sharpened. "Garrett," she said quietly, her voice carrying the tone that made people obey without questioning. "We have incoming. 4 hostiles. North approach." Commander Reeves didn't ask how she knew. Didn't waste time with questions. He was a SEAL. He understood that when someone with combat experience said threat, you moved first and verified later. He scooped Sophie from the therapy mat, where bathroom, interior room, no windows, locked the door. Nora turned to Hartley, whose face had gone pale. "Doctor, get in there with them. Stay quiet. Don't come out until I say it's clear." "What about you?" "I'm going to slow them down." Nora pulled out her phone, dialed 911, left the line open. She placed the phone on the couch where it could record everything evidence that would later prove crucial in the investigation. Then moved to the front door. Through the window, she could see them now. 4 men in dark tactical clothing, moving with the coordinated precision of contractors. Not amateurs, not street thugs hired for intimidation. These were operators, former military or law enforcement trained in building entry and target extraction. They were here to take Sophie, to disappear her, to eliminate the evidence that Program Genesis victims could be helped. The front door exploded inward. They hadn't bothered picking the lock, just hit it with a battering ram, breaching with textbook efficiency, moving through the fatal funnel with weapons drawn. Not guns. This wasn't meant to be a murder, at least not initially. Tasers, zip ties, black bags. This was a snatch operation. The first man through made it 3 steps before Nora hit him. She didn't have a weapon, didn't need one. 6 years of combat medical training included extensive hand-to-hand combat because corpsmen were priority targets. You learned to fight or you died. She drove her palm into his solar plexus, used his forward momentum against him, sent him stumbling into the man behind him. The second operative recovered faster than she'd expected, brought his taser up. His taser. She grabbed his wrist, redirected the weapon, used a joint lock she'd learned from a Marine Corps combat instructor. The taser discharged into the floor. Then the third man hit her from the side. Nora went down hard, tasting blood, ears ringing. Trained grappling technique executed perfectly. She was good, but these men were bigger, stronger, and there were 4 of them. The fight lasted maybe 90 seconds. It felt like hours. She got in good hits. Broke one man's nose with an elbow strike. Heard another one curse when her boot connected with his knee. But the outcome was never really in doubt. 4 trained operators against 1 woman, no matter how skilled, was mathematics, not heroism. They had her on the ground, zip tie around her wrists when the cavalry arrived. The front window shattered, not from gunfire, from a wheelchair. Randall Foster came through the glass like an avenging angel. His chair's momentum carrying him into the living room, shotgun across his lap. The boom of the 12-gauge in enclosed space was deafening. "Federal property," he roared, voice carrying the authority of someone who'd faced down worse than 4 thugs in tactical gear. "This is an illegal assault on a military family stand-down, or the next one goes center mass." The operators froze. Training told them to neutralize the threat. Survival instinct told them that a 73-year-old man in a wheelchair with a combat shotgun was not a threat to underestimate. The front door, already damaged, took another hit as Deacon Keller and Briggs McAllister came through, moving with the kind of coordinated efficiency that only came from decades of practice. Deacon had a pistol, legally owned concealed carry permit, visible on his belt. Briggs carried a tire iron and the kind of expression that suggested he'd be happy to use it. 4 on 1. Deacon's voice was conversational, almost friendly. "That's not very sporting, gentlemen. How about we even the odds?" The tactical team leader, recognizable by his slightly better gear and the way others deferred to him, assessed the situation. 3 old veterans armed, positioned to support each other. The element of surprise gone. Police sirens audible in the distance, getting closer. The 911 call Nora had placed was bringing reinforcements. "This isn't your fight, old man," he said. "Son, I'm 71 years old, and I've been looking for a good fight for about 20 years. Deacon smiled, but there was nothing warm in it. "You just made my week. Now I'm going to give you one chance to walk out of here. After that, we start breaking things." Randall pumped the shotgun. "And I'm too old to miss at this range." The team leader made a calculation. Whatever they were being paid, it wasn't enough to shoot it out with armed veterans in a residential neighborhood with cops 90 seconds away. He gestured to his men. They withdrew, moving backward toward the shattered door, maintaining visual contact, still executing tactics even in retreat. "This isn't over," the team leader said. "It never is," Briggs replied. "But tonight you lost. Live with it." They melted into the darkness. 30 seconds later, Nora heard vehicle engines. By the time the first patrol car arrived, lights blazing, the tactical team was gone. The bathroom door opened. Garrett emerged carrying Sophie with Hartley close behind. His face was carved from stone eyes, cold with the kind of anger that comes from watching your child being threatened and being unable to protect her. "Everyone okay?" he asked. Nora worked her wrists out of the zip tie, another skill from another life. "Define okay." Randall Wheeler wheeled over to her glass, crunching under his chair. "You all right, Corman?" "I've been worse." She touched her lip, which was split and bleeding. "Thank you for coming." "We were always coming," Deacon said. "Question is what now?" "They'll be back, with more people, better planning." Nora looked at Sophie, who was clutching her father with the wide-eyed terror of a child who just learned that monsters were real. Looked at Hartley, whose hands were shaking, but whose jaw was set with determination. Looked at three old men who'd just committed assault to protect someone they barely knew. "Now we move," Nora said. "Somewhere they won't expect. Somewhere we can control the environment." "The VA," Thorne said from the doorway. Nobody had noticed him arrive, but there he was, medical bag in hand, already moving to check Nora for injuries. "It's scheduled for closure next month. Barely staffed, mostly empty. We can set up there." "That's government property," Hartley said. "We can't just—" "Can't we?" Thorne's eyes were hard. "It's our VA, built for veterans, maintained by veterans. If we're not allowed to use it to protect our own, what the hell good is it?" Garrett nodded slowly. "I can get us access. I know the director. Owe him from Afghanistan. He'll look the other way for a few days." The police arrived in force, 4 patrol cars, lights, painting the neighborhood in red and blue. Nora gave a statement that was technically true, but strategically incomplete. 4 men broke in. "We defended ourselves. They fled before you arrived. No, we don't know who they were or why they came." The officers took notes with the weary skepticism of people who knew they were being told a version of the truth, not the whole truth. But without bodies, without suspects, without witnesses willing to contradict the story, there wasn't much they could do. One of the officers, a sergeant with 20 years on the force and the look of someone who'd seen too much, pulled Nora aside. "Off the record," he said quietly. "This had the feel of a tactical operation. These weren't burglars. These weren't random thugs. Someone sent them, and someone's going to send more." He paused. "Whatever you're into, whatever you're doing that's worth this kind of heat, I hope it's worth it. Because people who can afford operators like that, they don't stop until they get what they want or someone makes them stop." "It's worth it," Nora said. "Then watch your back and maybe get somewhere safer than a suburban house with a broken door." By midnight, they'd moved. The VA hospital on the east side of the city became their fortress. Garrett used his connections, his command authority, his willingness to burn favors that had taken years to accumulate. The director, a former Army Ranger who'd served with Garrett in Kandahar, didn't ask questions, just handed over keys and disabled security cameras in the East Wing. "You've got 72 hours, he said. "After that, I can't cover for you. Too many people notice too many questions I can't answer." 72 hours is enough," Garrett replied. They set up in what had been the physical therapy wing. Thorne knew the building intimately, knew which rooms had the best sight lines, which corridors offered escape routes, which doors could be barricaded. The old veterans moved through the space with the efficiency of men setting up a defensive perimeter, because that's exactly what they were doing. Randall took position near the main entrance, his wheelchair parked where he had clear fields of fire down 2 hallways. Briggs climbed to the second floor, found a window with good visibility over the parking lot. Deacon coordinated communications, setting up a network of cell phones and radios. Marcus Webb arrived with 2 other veterans Nora hadn't met, both in their mid-60s, both moving like men who remembered how to soldier. They brought supplies: food, water, medical equipment, weapons legal and otherwise. "Heard you could use some help," Webb said simply. The last guard was assembling. While the old warriors prepared for siege, Nora focused on Sophie. The girl was terrified, traumatized by the attack, regressing into the shell she'd built over 4 years of pain and disappointment. "I want to stop," Sophie said, tears streaming down her face. "It's too dangerous. They're going to hurt people because of me." Nora knelt beside the wheelchair. "Sophie, look at me." She waited until the girl's eyes met hers. "Those men didn't come because you're trying to get better. They came because powerful people want to hide what they did to you and 18 other children. Your healing threatens their lives. That's not your fault. That's theirs. But what if someone gets hurt? Then they get hurt fighting for something that matters, fighting for you, fighting for the truth." Nora took Sophie's small hands in hers. "All those men out there, they chose to be here. Nobody forced them. They're here because you deserve to walk again, and they're willing to stand between you and the people who say you don't. Why? Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. Because that's what we do. Veterans, I mean. We protect people who can't protect themselves. We stand up to bullies with power. We refuse to accept that might makes right. Nora smiled, though her split lip made it painful. And because you're brave, Sophie, you've been brave every day for 4 years. Now it's our turn to be brave for you. Sophie was quiet for a long moment. Then she straightened in her wheelchair. Okay, let's keep going. Let's make them sorry they tried to stop us. That's my girl. They worked through the night. Not on therapy, Sophie was too shaken, too exhausted, but on planning, on strategy, on what came next. Hartley had an idea. We need to document everything, every session, every improvement, every technique. Video photographs, detailed notes. If we can prove that Sophie is recovering, we can prove that the other children can recover too. We can expose what was done to them. That makes us a bigger target, Garrett said. We're already a target, Nora countered. But if we have documentation, if we have proof that we send to journalists, to congressmen, to veterans advocacy groups, then killing us doesn't solve their problem. It makes it worse. The evidence still exists. Thorne nodded slowly. Insurance, smart. Zahn, they spent 3 hours setting up cameras, writing detailed protocols, creating redundant backups of everything. Hartley proved invaluable, her medical training, giving the documentation professional credibility. She wrote everything in clinical language, turned Nora's battlefield techniques into procedures that could be reviewed and replicated. At 4 a.m., Garrett's phone rang. He stepped away to answer. It came back 5 minutes later with a face carved from granite. That was my CO, he said. I've been placed on administrative leave pending investigation of unauthorized access to classified materials. I'm confined to base effective immediately. They're isolating you, Thorne said, cutting you off from your support network. Trying to, Garrett's smile was predatory. They forget I've been running covert operations for 20 years. I know how to ignore orders when the mission requires it. You'll be court-martialed. Probably don't care. My daughter is more important than my career. Nora felt something tight in her chest, a man willing to sacrifice everything for what was right. She'd known people like that, had been people like that. Most of them were dead or broken by a system that punished integrity. We need to move faster, she said. 72 hours isn't enough. We need Sophie making visible progress, undeniable progress, the kind that can't be explained away as spontaneous recovery or measurement error. That's dangerous, Thorne warned. Pushing too hard, too fast, we could hurt her, set her back. Doing nothing guarantees they win. Nora looked at each person in turn. I'm not saying we endanger Sophie. I'm saying we give her the chance to surprise us. Let her show us what she's capable of when she's not being told it's impossible. Sophie spoke up from her wheelchair. I want to try. I want to stand. Sophie, Garrett started. Dad, I've been sitting for 4 years. 4 years of everyone telling me I'll never walk. I'm tired of sitting. I'm tired of accepting. Sophie's young voice carried steel. Nora says I could stand. I believe her. Let me try now. The room fell silent. Then Thorne moved to his medical bag, started pulling out equipment. If we're doing this, we do it right. Proper support, safety equipment, and the very second it looks like we're causing harm, we stop. Agreed. Agreed, Nora said. They prepared the room, set up parallel bars for support, brought in the physical therapy equipment from Garrett's house, positioned cameras to document everything. Hartley checked Sophie's vitals, established baseline measurements, prepared to monitor for any sign of distress. At 5 a.m., with the sun just beginning to paint the eastern sky, they began. Nora used every technique she'd learned, pressure point stimulation to wake dormant neural pathways, visualization exercises to rebuild the connection between intention and action, gradual weight transfer to teach Sophie's body that it could bear load without pain. Sophie trembled, sweat poured down her face. Her breathing came in gasps. It hurts, she whispered. I know, Nora said gently, but is it the hurt of damage or the hurt of effort, like muscles burning or exercise? Sophie concentrated. Effort. It's like my legs forgot how to work and now they're remembering, and it's hard. That's exactly right. Keep going. You're doing amazing. 40 minutes and Sophie's legs began to accept weight. Not much, maybe 20% of her body mass. But her knees didn't buckle. Her muscles engaged. Her feet pressed against the floor with intention. I can feel it, Sophie said, wonder in her voice. I can feel the floor. 60 minutes in, she was supporting 40% of her weight. Hartley monitored vitals, constantly watching for signs of system shock, but Sophie's body was responding beautifully. 4 years of enforced rest meant her muscles hadn't atrophied as much as they would have in a true paralysis case. The problem had been neural, not physical, and neural problems could be retrained. At 70 minutes, Nora made a decision. Sophie, I'm going to step back slightly. Not far. Just enough that you're supporting more of your own weight. If it's too much, I'm right here. Ready. Sophie's eyes were wide with fear and determination. Ready. Nora reduced her support. 15%, 20%, 30%. Sophie stood, not perfectly, not without trembling, not without visible effort that made every muscle in her small body stand out in sharp relief. But she stood, her feet bearing her weight, her legs locked in place, her body remembering something it had been forced to forget. Dad, she whispered. Dad, I'm standing. Garrett Reeves, Navy SEAL commander, veteran of 8 combat deployments, man who'd faced down enemy fire without flinching, dropped to his knees and wept. Hartley's hands shook as she operated the camera, documenting the moment that would prove everything. Prove that Sophie's diagnosis had been wrong. Prove that the other children could be helped. Prove that Program Genesis had created a problem and then abandoned the victims rather than face the consequences. Thorne stood back, arms crossed, but Nora saw the moisture in his eyes, saw the vindication of a lifetime spent believing that medicine was more than just following protocols. The old veterans watching from the doorway stood at attention, not consciously, just the automatic response of soldiers witnessing something that deserved respect. They'd seen many things in their long lives, many horrors, many tragedies, few miracles. This was a miracle. Sophie stood for 90 seconds before her legs began to shake too violently to continue. Nora eased her back into the wheelchair, and the girl collapsed into it, breathing like she'd run a marathon. You did it, Nora said softly. You actually did it. Can I do it again? Not today. Your body needs rest, needs time to process what just happened. Nora brushed sweat-soaked hair from Sophie's forehead. But yes, tomorrow we do it again, and the next day, and the next. Until standing isn't hard anymore, until walking becomes possible, until running becomes your goal. Sophie smiled through exhaustion. I'm going to run someday. I'm going to run and jump and dance and do everything they said I couldn't do. I believe you. The moment of triumph that lasted exactly 12 more minutes. Then Randall's voice came over the radio. We've got company, big company, looks like a dozen vehicles, maybe more, setting up a perimeter. This isn't a snatch team. This is a siege force. Nora moved to the window, saw what Randall had seen. Black SUVs, vans, men in dark suits and tactical gear, setting up roadblocks, establishing positions. They're not coming to take Sophie, Thorne said quietly. They're coming to ensure we can't prove what we just proved. Garrett's phone rang. He answered, listened for 30 seconds, his face going hard. He ended the call without speaking. That was Colonel Marcus Wolfe, he said. He's outside, wants to negotiate, says we can all walk away from this if we destroy the documentation and agree to stop treating Sophie. Says if we refuse, he'll come in and take what he wants by force. He's bluffing, Briggs said. He can't assault a VA hospital. The optics would destroy him. He's not bluffing, Nora countered. He's desperate. We just proved that 19 children are living with disabilities he could have prevented or treated. That's not just a scandal. That's criminal negligence, at minimum, potentially manslaughter. He'll do whatever it takes to bury this. Deacon checked his weapon. Then we make sure he can't. We're 7 people, Hartley said, her voice shaking. 7 people against what looks like a small army. This is insane. Sanity is overrated, Randall said cheerfully. Besides, we've got home field advantage. We know this building. They don't. Garrett looked at Nora. Your call, Corpsman. You started this. What do we do? Nora thought about 3 Syrian children whose names she couldn't pronounce, but whose faces she'd never forget. Thought about Private Morrison bleeding out in a trauma bay. Thought about Sophie standing on legs that doctors said would never work again. Thought about a career spent trying to do the right thing in a world that punished integrity. We fight, she said, not with guns, with truth. We stream the documentation. Send it to every media outlet, every congressman, every veterans advocacy group. We make it so public that Wolfe can't bury it no matter what he does to us. He'll still come, Thorne said. Then we slow him down, give the truth time to spread. Nora smiled, but there was no humor in it. We're veterans. We know how to hold a position against superior numbers. We've done it before. That was 40 years ago, Webb said. Some skills you don't forget. Hartley was already on her laptop uploading files to cloud storage, sending emails with attachments to every contact in her database. I'm sending it everywhere: news networks, medical journals, congressional oversight committees, veterans groups. Once I hit send, this goes public. There's no taking it back. Then hit send, Nora said. Hartley's finger hovered over the button. This was the moment, the point of no return. Everything that came after would be consequence. She pressed send. The files uploaded, dispersed, replicated across servers and inboxes and cloud storage systems. Within minutes, hundreds of people would have access. Within hours, thousands. By tomorrow, the world would know what had been done to 23 children in the name of military medical research. Nora's phone rang, unknown number. She answered anyway. Corpsman Blackwood. Colonel Marcus Wolf's voice was cultured, educated, the voice of a man who'd spent decades in positions of authority. You just made a terrible mistake. I just told the truth. If that's a mistake, we've got bigger problems than you threatening me. I'm not threatening you, I'm informing you of reality. Those files you just sent will be suppressed. The media contacts will be managed. The congressional representatives will be reminded of their priorities. And you will be arrested for theft of classified information, unauthorized practice of medicine, and half a dozen other charges I'll invent before lunch. Maybe, but you'll still go down. The files are out there. People will ask questions. Veterans groups will demand answers. You can't intimidate all of them. Wolf laughed. It was a cold sound devoid of genuine amusement. Ms. Blackwood, I've been managing problems like you for 30 years. I know exactly how to make this go away. The question is how much damage you want to suffer before you accept the inevitable. I've accepted worse. I survived Syria. I'll survive you. We'll see. The line went dead. 60 seconds later, the power to the east wing went out. They'd cut the electricity, plunged the building into darkness, illuminated only by emergency lighting that would last maybe 2 hours before the batteries died. They're coming, Garrett said, his voice calm with the certainty of a man who'd been in firefights before. Standard assault protocol. Cut power, cut communications breach under darkness. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they hit the building. The last guard moved into position. 7 people, 3 old veterans who should have been retired, a disgraced Navy corpsman, a young doctor who'd never been in combat, a SEAL commander facing court-martial, and a 9-year-old girl in a wheelchair preparing to hold a hospital against a force that outgunned and outnumbered them. It should have been hopeless. But they'd all been in hopeless situations before, and somehow they were still here. Remember, Nora said as they took their positions, we're not trying to win, we're just trying to last long enough for the truth to matter. Hold the line. Protect Sophie. Make them work for every inch. Randall pumped his shotgun. Rangers lead the way. Deacon checked his pistol. This will defend. Briggs hefted his tire iron. Semper Fi. Webb settled into a firing position. Death before dishonor. Thorne stood beside Nora, medical bag in hand. First, do no harm. Unless they really deserve it. Hartley was pale but steady. I took an oath. To protect patients. That includes protecting them from people like Wolf. Garrett put himself between the entrance and his daughter. You want her? You go through me first. Sophie looked at all of them. These broken, battered people who'd chosen to stand when falling would have been easier. Thank you, she said quietly, for believing I could stand, for helping me remember how. Thank you for giving us something worth fighting for, Nora replied. The assault came at dawn. They hit 3 entry points simultaneously: front door loading dock, second floor emergency exit. Coordinated, methodical, exactly what Nora had expected. But the old veterans had prepared well. Barricades slowed the advance. Choke points forced the assault teams into areas where numbers didn't matter as much. Randall's shotgun boomed from the front entrance. Not aiming to kill, warning shots fired, high buying time. The assault team took cover, reassessed, called for support. Deacon and Briggs held the loading dock, using furniture as barricades, making every foot of corridor cost time and effort. They weren't trying to stop the assault. Just delay it. Make it messy. Make it public. Because by now the files Hartley sent were being opened, read, shared. The truth was spreading like wildfire through military communities, veterans organizations, civilian media. Wolf's phone was probably ringing off the hook. The assault teams pushed forward, methodical and relentless. They had numbers, equipment, training, but the defenders had desperation and the home field advantage and the willingness to make this hurt. Nora stayed with Sophie in the central room, Hartley beside her, both of them ready to move if the perimeter broke. Garrett prowled the space like a caged wolf weapon, ready every instinct, screaming at him to engage, but knowing his job was to be the last line between his daughter and the people who wanted to silence her. 10 minutes became 20, 20 became 30. The assault teams were inside the building and now moving methodically, clearing rooms, advancing toward the center where Sophie waited. Then the sirens started, not building alarms, police sirens, fire trucks, news helicopters overhead. Someone had called it in. Probably multiple people, neighbors, hearing gunfire, journalists who'd received Hartley's email and put together where this was happening, veterans groups organizing rapid response. Either way, the siege was no longer private. Wolf's assault teams froze. Their advantage was secrecy, speed, the ability to control the narrative. With emergency services responding with news helicopters filming from above, that advantage evaporated. Nora's phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "Stand down, this is over." She showed it to Garrett, who smiled grimly. "He's retreating, can't risk the exposure." The assault teams withdrew, not quickly, still executing his tactics, still maintaining security, still covering their exit. But they left, melting back into vehicles and disappearing before the first patrol cars arrived. The police came in force. FBI not far behind, news vans set up in the parking lot. By mid-morning, the siege of the VA hospital was the lead story on every network, and the files Hartley had sent were being read by people who mattered. Congressional staffers demanding investigations, veterans advocacy groups calling for Wolf's arrest, medical ethicists condemning Program Genesis as a violation of every principle of informed consent in patient care. The truth was out. It couldn't be buried now. 6 months later, Nora sat in a congressional hearing room, her testimony being broadcast live to the nation. Beside her sat Commander Garrett Reeves, Dr. Vanessa Hartley, and Dr. Callahan Thorne. Behind them sat the families of 19 children who'd been told their disabilities were permanent. In front of them sat Colonel Marcus Wolf, flanked by lawyers, his face carefully neutral. The chairman of the Oversight Committee, a senator from Montana who'd served in the Army Rangers 40 years ago, looked at Wolf with undisguised contempt. "Colonel Wolf, we have documentation showing that you were aware these children could potentially be helped, that their conditions were not permanent paralysis but learned neurological inhibition. We have evidence that you chose to suppress this information to threaten families, to cover up the consequences of Program Genesis rather than face accountability. Do you have anything to say?" Wolf's lawyers whispered urgently in his ear. He ignored them. "I did what I thought was necessary to protect national security interests and preserve the integrity of important research programs." "You abandoned children to wheelchairs to save your career," the senator said flatly. "That's not national security. That's cowardice." The hearing continued for 6 hours. Testimony from families, medical evidence from Hartley, combat medical protocols from Thorne, Nora's first-hand account of treating Sophie, and video of Sophie Reeves standing on her own 2 legs for the first time in 4 years. The verdict was swift and brutal. Wolf was stripped of rank, dishonorably discharged, charged with multiple federal crimes. 41 other officials involved in Program Genesis faced similar consequences. $3 billion in misappropriated funds were redirected to veteran health care, and a new program was established, the Combat Medicine Integration Initiative, designed to incorporate battlefield medical techniques into civilian healthcare to train doctors in the kind of improvisation and adaptation that had saved Sophie's life. Nora was offered the director position. She turned it down. "I'm not a bureaucrat," she told the senators. "I'm a medic. Let me do what I'm good at." Instead, she accepted a position at the VA hospital, now fully funded, newly renovated, transformed from a dying facility into a cutting-edge treatment center, the Combat Trauma Recovery Program, teaching doctors the techniques she'd learned in war, training the next generation of medical professionals to see patients as people, not data points. Dr. Hartley joined as Director of Medical Education, Thorne as Senior Advisor. Together, they built something that honored the old warriors who'd stood guard while Nora helped Sophie stand. Randall Foster, Deacon Keller Briggs, McAllister, Marcus Webb, they became instructors, teaching young medical students what it meant to serve, what it cost, what it was worth. The last guard given purpose again. On the 1-year anniversary of the siege, Nora stood in the physical therapy room watching Sophie work. The girl was 10 now, taller, stronger. She walked with minimal assistance, ran with determination, played soccer with the fierce joy of someone reclaiming childhood. "How's it feel?" Nora asked. Sophie grinned. "Like I'm flying." Garrett watched from the doorway, no longer facing court-martial. The Navy had quietly reinstated him with full rank and a formal apology. He caught Nora's eye and nodded, the kind of wordless communication that only happened between people who'd been through fire together. "You know what the best part is?" Sophie said, slightly out of breath from her run. There are 18 other kids doing what I'm doing, getting better, learning to move again, because you wouldn't give up. We wouldn't give up, Nora corrected gently. All of us, together. That's what Dad says, that the military teaches you to fight as a unit. That one person can start something, but it takes a team to finish it. Your dad's a smart man. Sophie was quiet for a moment, then looked at Nora with those two old eyes. The doctors told me I'd never walk. They were so sure, so certain. How did you know they were wrong? Nora thought about it, about the moment in that emergency room when she'd chosen to step forward instead of staying invisible, about the decision to help Sophie despite every rule saying she shouldn't, about the choice to fight when surrender would have been safer. I didn't know they were wrong, she said finally. I just knew they hadn't asked the right questions. They looked at Squins and saw damage. I looked at you and saw possibility. Sometimes the difference between impossible and difficult is just whether someone's willing to try. I'm glad you tried. Me too, kiddo. Me too. As the sun set over San Diego, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Nora walked through the halls of the VA hospital, past the training rooms where young doctors learned from old warriors, past the therapy rooms where broken bodies remembered how to work, past the memorial wall where photos of fallen veterans watched over the living. She'd lost her career in the Navy, lost her anonymity, lost the quiet life she'd been trying to build counting gauze in a supply closet. But she'd found something more important: purpose, community. The knowledge that her skills still mattered, that her experience had value, that the years of war and sacrifice hadn't been wasted. She'd found home. Her phone buzzed. Text from Thorne. New patient tomorrow, 8-year-old, traumatic brain injury. Doctors say he'll never speak again. Family desperate. You interested? Nora smiled him, typed back always. What time? Because that's what they did. Veterans medics, the people who'd learned in the hardest schools that giving up wasn't an option. They found the impossible cases, the abandoned patients, the people everyone else had written off. And they asked the question nobody else thought to ask. What if we tried? Sometimes they failed. Sometimes the damage was too great, the injury too severe, the time too long passed. But sometimes, just often enough to matter, they succeeded. And that made every risk, every sacrifice, every consequence worth bearing. Nora Blackwood walked out into the evening air, breathing deep, feeling the weight of purpose settle on her shoulders like an old familiar uniform. She was home, and the work was just beginning.